This is Damian Macy from the Friends of the Marshall Public Library. As part of our oral history project, I have today with us Mr. Joe Schroeder, who's been a lawyer in the community for some time, not originally from here, but I imagine we'll find out why he came to Marshall. So with that, I'll introduce you to Joe. This is October the 15th, Wednesday.
16th.
15th.
October 16th. Today. That's okay. So, as Damon said, my name is Joe Schroeder, or formerly Joseph R. Schroeder. I'm from Terre Haute, Indiana, originally. My parents were Jack and Virginia Schroeder. They were both school teachers in Vigo County. And I have 4 siblings. I have 3 brothers and a sister. Oldest sibling is Jack, named after my dad, Jack Schroeder. Next oldest sibling is my sister Ann Schroeder. Next oldest sibling is my brother William Kurt, K-U-R-T, but he goes by Kurt. So Schroeder. And then my youngest sibling is Peter Schroeder. None of whom live in the area. The 2 of them live in Florida, 1 of them in northern Indiana, and the other one in Zionsville. You had a question?
As I recall, I think one of your brothers is quite the enthusiast and excited about a place called the Indianapolis 500.
Yes, my oldest brother, Jack. My dad worked at the Indianapolis 500 Speedway as a part-time worker on qualification days and race day. So kind of the safety patrol people. And growing up in Terre Haute, well, my dad and mom were both natives of Terre Haute, but everyone was fairly familiar, knew someone who knew Tony Holman, who owned the Speedway. And through those connections, my dad, but he was a race enthusiast. He was a sports enthusiast. He loved any sports. So he got to working at the Speedway probably in the early 50s and did that until probably into the 60s. And so Jack, my oldest brother, and I started going with him. And so we got involved or became race fans. And we still are, and we still go. And so between my oldest brother and I, we have probably seen over 100 together, but probably 50 years or more of races, maybe close to 60. And then my brother Jack is a collector of Indy 500 memorabilia. He goes to shows. He has a little business on the side where he buys and sells. And my dad's birthday was May 30th, 1923. Well, they used to run the race actually on May 30th until about 20 years ago or so. No, didn't matter what day May 30th fell on, that was Memorial Day, and that's when the race ran. And that happens to be my dad's birth date, May 30th. I don't know if that had anything to do with his interest, but I recently, through my brother Jack, acquired a race program from the race May 30th, 1923. I have that program. So anyway, yes, that's been a big thing in our family. So I went to high school in Terre Haute. I went to Indiana University undergrad. And then I went to John Marshall Law School in Chicago for my law school education. So I graduated in '72 from college, 75 from law school, and 76 is when I came to Marshall.
What did you major at Indiana State?
I majored, and it was Indiana University at Bloomington. Zoology is my major. Now, yeah, everybody kind of like, what the heck? Well, I started out thinking I was going to go into dentistry. And so for a couple years, I was on that kind of biology and chemistry and that kind of sciences track. And then I decided in my junior year, I didn't think I wanted to be a dentist, so I thought I would be a lawyer. But I was far enough along in that track, and I kind of enjoyed it, so I just stayed with the zoology major and ended up with a zoology major and a history minor. And law school really doesn't care what your major is as long as you did well. So it didn't matter.
In looking back, do you ever say, wonder what that dentistry would have been like?
I did, and I had a good family friend who was a dentist, but we had good family friends who were lawyers. And I saw myself in this little room looking in people's mouths all day. And I just, I thought, well, no, I thought being a lawyer would be more interesting.
You'd want to be down in the mouth all the time.
Yeah, right. So I started practicing in Terre Haute. To back up a minute, my plan was to go back to my hometown, Terre Haute. My primary goal was to pass the Indiana bar exam. So I went to Bloomington, Indiana, took a bar review course. Now, I had been in a Illinois law school for 3 years. So I took a bar review course in Bloomington, Indiana to get ready for the Indiana bar exam. And kind of at the last minute, and at that time it didn't cost much, I thought, well, why not take the Illinois bar exam also? And they were both given within a few weeks of each other, and I kind of crammed for the Illinois exam, but I had been in Illinois law school for 3 years. So fortunately, I passed them both. So I had a license, and still do, in both states.
Are the exams similar, or are they quite different? I know each state seems to have a lot of regulations that are different from one another.
They're different, and at that time they were different. I mean, we're going back 50 years. So almost 50 years, 49 years. Indiana was 2 days. They're both 2 days, about 8 hours a day. And Indiana was all writing. They gave these little blue books, as you recall, anyone back that old, did a lot of tests. You had a blue book and you wrote stuff. So it was all writing, no computers. Again, I'm taking a bar exams in 1975. So it's all written, and so that was the Indiana exam. Now the Illinois exam was 1 day of what they called a multi-state exam, which could be transferred to other states, and then 1 day of writing. So it was kind of a mixture. So the two tests were not the same. They were totally different. And now today, that's changed, and there is I would call it multi-state. I don't know what the real term is, but if you pass enough sections of the exam, you can get licensed in some other states. Yes, because I know my daughter just recently 2 years ago, became an attorney. Went back to school, got through school, same law school as that I went to, coincidentally. and she was able to get she only took the bar exam in Illinois, but she was able to get licensed in Indiana also, and she practices in Chicago.
If she wanted to practice in, say, Missouri or somewhere else, would she have to take another exam there?
I don't know. All states are different.
Yeah.
I can tell you that the states that everyone would like to get licensed in, like Florida and California or Arizona, are harder to get licensed at. Yeah, and some of those you have to actually sit and take the bar exam in order to get licensed, and not too many people in the are interested in doing that. So anyway, so here I am in Terre Haute, Indiana, having passed both bar exams, but I get a job as a deputy prosecutor for Vigo County to put a little money in my pocket. And then I'm kind of have a little bit of a private practice I'm working on and trying to build up. And that goes on from the fall of '75. I get sworn in both states in October, November of 1975. Along about April of 1976, the phone rings, and it's Omer Schaller, who knew me and knew my parents through some common friends. And Omer tells me about a lawyer by the name of Bill Downey who had passed away suddenly in Marshall, and was at that time had a partner who was Grendel Bennett, who at that time Grendel was 75 years old himself, and his brother Cass was a judge, and Omer invited me to come over and meet and talk to the Bennetts, and I did, and as they say, the rest is history. I thought, and I had a few irons in the fire in Terre Haute, but I was advised by more than one person that this seemed like a pretty good opportunity. And so around May 1st of 1976, I started practicing at the firm at that time was called Bennett and Downey. And I was still living in Terre Haute at my parents' house. And but eventually the next, later that year, I think in '76, I moved to 906, no, I moved a little apartment. Foster Hornbrook and his wife owned a house on 10th Street near the IGA. And there was an alley that ran by it on the south side. He had a 2-car garage that he had converted half of it into an apartment. So the first place I lived was in this little studio apartment, I would call it, in Marshall, and I think it was $75 a month, and so that's where I lived for, I don't know, a year or so. And then Faye Cork was Cass Bennett's secretary, and she owned a house on Cedar Street next to Cammie Sanders' house, and it was available and I bought it. So I don't know when that was exactly, maybe 77 or 78. I bought 906 Cedar Street and lived there until the time, and then I met Alice Mackey and we got married in 1983, and I was still on Cedar Street. And then in 1986, we moved out to where we are now, which is Brainerd subdivision. We had a house built out there. So I have now lived in Marshall since, the fall of 1976. So, I haven't been here, I guess, 48 years now.
How did you happen to meet Alice?
I met Alice at the golf course. We both play golf, and we both like to play together. Now, maybe that's odd. Some spouses can't seem to get along that well, but Alice is probably as avid a golfer as I am. So a friend of mine and I were out playing golf one day. I don't know when this was, 81, 82. And we noticed these two girls who were playing golf. And so we kind of arranged to where we could get close enough to sort of introduce ourselves. And so we did. I met Alice that way. And we didn't talk very long. And then all of a sudden, she's working at the county clerk's office in the courthouse. She got a job in the courthouse. I think Les Literal was a county clerk. And so lawyers tend to, have to go to the county clerk's office, more so then than now because of the internet. Because, if you wanted to look something up, you needed to go look it up. And so I go in there and there's Alice and we start talking and going to lunch and started dating. And one thing led to another and we got married in February.
Courthouse does a lot of wonders, huh?
Yeah. So February of '83, we get married. So that's how that happened. So I had a good childhood when I was growing up. I mean, the one question is, what was your neighborhood like? It was a different era. It was the 50s, early 60s. We rode bikes all over the neighborhood. We got together at Sugar Grove Elementary School is only about 3 blocks. Where I grew up was 2801 Holman Street. So, and there was a neighborhood there, and everybody got along, it seemed like, and we had all kinds of activities, and there weren't cell phones, but somehow you knew when to go home, or your parents knew where you were, and they could call a neighbor and say, "Hey, is Joe there?" And
the sun went down.
Yeah, or the sun went down. So, and I went to, my dad was in World War II. He came back, and through the GI Bill, he bought a piece of property in Terre Haute. Well, he didn't realize that one of the conditions of the GI Bill is you've got to live in that property. You can't you have to live at least a year in the real estate that you purchased through the GI Bill, and I think that still may be true. So we already had a house on Holman Street, which the financing of that house had been provided by my dad's uncle, George Martin, who owned the Goody Shop Cafeteria.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Uncle George, I think, loaned my dad $5,000, and my dad paid him back.
Quite a sum.
Yeah, that was a sum, with several kids, and you're just kind of on a teacher's salary at that time was not much.
Oh.
And my mom wasn't working then, but so that's where we lived. But I went to 2 different, I went to kindergarten at a school that's no longer, it's on 9th Street and it's a firehouse now. And they tore that building down. I went to half of first grade at St. Benedict's school, which that school doesn't exist anymore. And then because we had to move from Holman Street to South 9th Street, which was the GI Bill property. So my dad so we actually moved, rented Holman Street out for a year, and had to live on South 9th Street in a duplex. And so then we moved back to Holman Street after the year was up of the GI Bill requirement. And then I started going to St. Patrick's because our family grew up, my family's Catholic. I grew up Catholic. I went to St. Patrick's then through the 8th grade.
You probably knew Father Beecher then.
Oh yeah, yeah, he was big at getting Schulte started. So.
He officiated at our wedding.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, and then Monsignor Winterhalter was a stable in the community, and I was the altar boy in the whole 9 yards, and they used to joke about Father Winterhalter would never stop at any of the stop signs or going. Most of the funerals were at Calvary, so if you know from 19th and Poplar out to Calvary, and the joke was that Father Winterhalter would never stop for any stoplight or stop sign or anything. He felt like he could. So you're.
It was a hand from above.
So you're an altar boy, and you got the incense thing, and you got that, and it's hot because you used it in the church service. So you've got to keep that thing from tipping over in the back of the car. So, I had great years at St. Patrick's, and but then my mom and dad, part of our family went to Schulte and part didn't. And it was kind of a mix, and I think my dad felt like he owed something to the Vigo County School Corporation, who was writing his paycheck. And so a couple of us went, and I ended up going to Woodrow Wilson Junior High for my 9th grade, the big junior high school by Meadows. And then I went to Wiley for 3 years and graduated from Wiley. And probably if I'd had my choice, I'd just as soon gone on with my friends from St. Pat's into Schulte, but I wasn't the only one that happened to. So, it was fine. It worked out fine. I got a good education, and I went on to, and coincidentally, I took speech and debate in high school, and I think that had an impact on my career. Because I've never been shy about speaking. So, I had a good childhood, a good teen years. Things were fine. And my mom, after my youngest brother was born, she went back. She had never gone to college, and she went to Indiana State, and in about 2.5 to 3 years got through Indiana State. I mean, literally working nights after the dishes were done and the kids were put away. And she, both my parents were smart people, hardworking. And then she started teaching at Honey Creek High School, both English teachers. Started teaching, so we were constantly corrected with our English. We'd be on the phone talking to a friend, and we'd get corrected of our English. So anyway. And my mom then started teaching at Honey Creek. My dad had progressed from Woodrow Wilson to Wiley, and then when the consolidation happened, and neither Honey Creek nor Wiley existed. It became Terre Haute South. So they both ended up at Terre Haute South. So
You mentioned the 60s and 70s. I guess I looked back and felt probably the 60s and 70s were some of the best years.
they seem to be, when you look back, yeah, I mean, less complicated it seems like. You know, I mean, we went through the Cold War, we went through the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, there were things to be concerned about, but as far as your neighborhood there was no concern about you know, anything happening to anybody. It just didn't happen. So
I always said those were the BC, before computers and before cell phones.
yeah.
I think that was better.
Yeah, it probably was. You know, we had great neighbors. We really had neighbors. I mean, people you knew, people you were in and out of their houses, people who you that did things for you and you did things for them. I mean, it was, today you have neighbors, but it seems like everybody's so busy. Yeah, and again, maybe the cell phones and the computers have something to do with that. But I had great friends. Some of my best friends are still kids that I grew up with. You know, people that I do things with and see and talk to, and you know, you stay in touch.
Are most of them still in Terre Haute?
Yeah, I had, yes. We kind of had instead of the Three Musketeers, it was the Four Musketeers. So there was four of us. Unfortunately, one of them passed away a few years ago. But I have two good friends that are still in Terre Haute, still running their family business in Terre Haute, and you know, that I stay in touch with, and so you know, it was good, and our family. I mean, I had three brothers and a sister. The poor Ann, but she put up with us. And, you know, we had a great family. My dad was active in a lot of things. And like I said, he loved sports, loved to go to games. I mean, back then, if you wanted to see a football game or a baseball game, you about had to go see it. You know, there wasn't 20 of them on TV like they are now on Saturday afternoon. So, you know, trips to Chicago, trips to St. Louis, trips to Kansas City, of course, a lot of trips to Indianapolis. So there was a lot of traveling involved, and we always did an annual vacation. We went to Florida for like 20 years in a row to the same place. And we made two big trips out west. Two different times. I mean, my parents both love to travel. My parents ran a spring break trip to New York City for high school kids. This was again before computers and cell phones, and you're organizing all this over the telephone and through the mails, and you're getting everything lined up from hotel rooms to Broadway shows to a trip to sightseeing trip to
That's a real chore.
Sightseeing trips to West Point, the Statue of Liberty, Wall Street, and I went on 3 or 4 of those trips. And something I've always thought that was interesting was the first trip they did was 1956.
Good year.
They took the train out of Terre Haute to New York, the Spirit of St. Louis.
Yeah.
And they did it by train for probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 years until the train stopped running. And then they progressed, they started doing it by bus. And I went on a train trip. I went on a bus trip. and I went twice by plane because they progress from train to bus to plane. And actually, the train and the bus were the most fun. But, and so they did that for about 20 years. And for about 15 years, it was all boys. And then another teacher at Wiley took girls. He and his wife and a couple other chaperones took girls. So there was a boys' trip and a girls' trip. And yeah, well, that was the 50s and 60s and 70s. But then the teacher taking the girls stopped doing it. And then my dad took girls the last 4 or 5 trips because they were a little easier to take. They weren't as wild as the boys, and or it seemed that way. And plus, I think the parents maybe were a little bit more free with their money to send their daughters maybe than to send their sons. But anyway, that was a lot of fun. And sure. You got a question?
Well, I'd like to come back to Terre Haute.
Okay.
And in that period of time, I was quite involved with Terre Haute, going to school there. It's changed so much.
Yeah.
Would you kind of address all it used to be downtown as busy as could be?
Well,
And now, of course, you got your shopping centers and all. I understand that's progress, but it's just not quite the same.
No. Well, most downtowns aren't the same anymore, but Terre Haute had a vibrant downtown, especially at holiday time, but your shopping was downtown. I had a grandmother, my mom's mother, my mom's parents were Ray and Rose Hipple, Hipple, and my grandfather was a mechanic, and my grandmother worked at different shops downtown. I mean, she never drove. My grandmother never had a driver's license. She was born in 1903, and even though her husband was a mechanic, she never got a driver's license. Never drove a car, but she could walk 2 blocks to 7th Street to get on a bus to go downtown. She lived at 1500 or South 8th Street in Terre Haute. And so she could go to 7th Street and get the bus. But she worked at different dress shops and stores downtown. But yeah, and the stores, the Roots and Schultz and all kinds of different department stores and jewelry stores and drug stores and places downtown, and they were open on Thursday night late.
Roots and Pennies and all of those stores.
So I'll tell you a true story about downtown. So probably either I was in high school or college, and it was summertime, and I had been working, and I got cleaned up, and I just threw a few things on, like some shorts and a t-shirt or something, probably some sandals, and I'm heading out the door. My dad says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go downtown. I need to buy a few things." And he says, "Well, you don't go downtown." It was Thursday evening. So you can't go downtown like that. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, you need to put some better clothes on, put some pants on and a little nicer shirt." So I did. I mean, I usually did what my dad thought I should do. So I went and put some better clothes on. I mean, that was the way it was back then. One thing that I notice is the way people dress for just about any occasion. The formality of dressing is just, it's gone. So I went and got some better clothes on, went downtown, but yeah, I mean, downtown was it. And then the mall came, I don't know when that mall opened up, in the 70s or
I
something.
think the Meadow Center was the first one.
Well, Meadows was already there. They were the first
They
one,
were the
that's
first
true.
ones.
That they were there, but then when Honey Creek Square opened up and everything started moving out there, yeah, so, yeah, I mean, downtown was, was the place to go shopping. And coincidentally, Wiley had no cafeteria. Wiley was a 100-year-old building. Even in 1968, when I graduated from high school, Wiley was already about 100 years old, that building, and it had no cafeteria. I'm not sure it probably had some vending machines, but I don't recall really. What really stepped it up was when McDonald's came in, and the first McDonald's was across the street from Wiley High School at the corner of 7th and Poplar. And that McDonald's isn't there anymore, but and that was pretty much just a walk up, 15-cent hamburgers and 25-cent shakes or something. And I mean, that was like died and gone to heaven because you had a McDonald's. And but yeah, so at Wiley you got an hour for lunch, but you had to walk downtown. Either that or you had a car, you had friends that had a car, and I did that some too. But a lot of the lunch was downtown. And of course, the Goody Shop cafeteria was downtown, and other places where you could go to the Indiana State cafeteria. There was a little bit more of a walk, but you could go there. So
I remember there was a drugstore on the corner, I want to say 6th and Wabash, that had a balcony around and had food
yeah,
on the upper level. And I was thought, oh, that was really something good
Yeah.
to eat.
there was a place upstairs where we went to eat and get a hamburger.
Yeah.
There was a toasty shop.
Toasty.
Just different places you get something to eat. I had chores. I mean, just to look at your list, yes, and sometimes it was Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon, and my dad would say, nobody's mowed the grass, or nobody's washed the car, or my dad was pretty much a stickler for cleanliness. And one thing that we would do, we lived in the house was wood siding, as a lot of houses were back then in the 50s and 60s. We washed our house every year. I mean, we would literally wash the outside of that house, take all the storm windows out, wash them, and just keep things clean and neat.
I recall that period of time too, a lot of the heating was by coal.
Yes.
And I'm sure that made a lot of difference in the air.
We had coal. We heated by coal. But the upgrade was when we got the stoker.
Oh yeah.
So the stoker, then you could fill the stoker up, and that might take care of you for 2 or 3 days, and you wouldn't have to actually go down and feed the fire. Then you had those things called clinkers, where you had to get them out. Yeah, we had an old basement. I mean, the typical old kind of damp, dreary basement. And you always had the little room that was your coal bin, and there was an outside window, and they could shoot the coal down in there. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was what we had. Now, once we moved, eventually that was all upgraded. I don't know when that happened, but then when we moved, when I was in high school, we moved from Holman Street to Crawford Street, which is going north closer to Meadows.
Okay.
Okay, and now here's a little trivia thing. Our address on Holman Street was 2801 Holman. Our address on Crawford Street was 2801 Crawford. So we moved and didn't change the numbers.
Yes, that's
That that's
unusual.
That's very unusual. Well, the house we moved to was a dentist's house who retired from AP&S Clinic when AP&S Clinic in Terre Haute had a dentist, and that was a good friend of ours who moved from Alabama to Terre Haute to be a dentist, the new dentist at AP&S, and he moved right next door to us on Holman Street, and he and my dad became best of friends, and you wouldn't think they were any more alike than Mutt and Jeff or somebody, but here's this younger dentist from the South, from Birmingham, and here's my dad who grew up in Terre Haute and is a school teacher, and they were almost like brothers. And so that's how my dad found out that this retiring dentist at AP&S was wanting to sell his house. The house never went on the market, and my parents bought it.
Wasn't the AP&S in a big old 2 or 3 story house at least I remember going to that when I was a youngster. It was a big house on 6th Street.
Well, it is, when I knew it, it was across from the YMCA, but it's the current building that's there now.
That's modern times.
Yeah, that's modern. And he was the good friend of the family. His name was Shackelford, Bill Shackelford. And he was kind of the one that kind of got me interested in dentistry. Because I lost a front tooth when I was about, 7 or 8 years old playing basketball. Got it knocked out, and he put a cap in there, a temporary, and then and it was fine. And then I got a permanent one when my teeth quit growing, and I got a permanent one, and it's still there. So, but
good dentist.
Yeah, well, and especially it was a Friday or Saturday night. He was that good a friend that he did it whatever we needed. But you want me to go on about it?
Did you have any pets at that time?
We had a couple of dogs. We had a boxer named Ginger, and she had several litters. And then one day my parents took her to get spayed, I think they call it, and she died. And that was pretty rough on us. Yeah. We had, my dad had, he got a bulldog named Rocky. And Rocky was quite the dog. He was a big, what kind of an English bulldog or something? I don't know. He was one of those really tough looking. He was a baby, but he'd get to run around the house sometimes, and we had to grab stuff and hold on to it so he wouldn't knock it out. He actually knocked my grandmother down the stairs once because he was just
like a bulldozer.
Yeah, like a bulldozer. We had cats, several cats, and but yeah, Ginger, and we had Ginger for a long time, and Ginger would sit on the by the windowsill or something and wait for us to come home from school. Watch for us to come home from school. Jack, my brother, had a paper route that I helped him on, and I actually took that paper route over in the winter a few times when he was sick. And I'll tell you now, that'll teach you what work is when you're about 14 or 15 years old and you're out there at 6 o'clock in the morning in the snow trying to deliver papers.
And the personalities when you're trying to collect too.
Right, yeah. And then Oh, I had a job mopping a floor and cleaning up a restaurant once a week for somebody, and you know, that was kind of a chore. And then my dad was an investor in the Waffle House in Terre Haute. Now, not the big Waffle House chain that exists now, but there was a business called the Waffle House in Terre Haute, north of the courthouse. And he and some high school friends of his and people he knew found out about this franchise and thought, and all thought Terre Haute would be a good place. And it was like the first 24-hour restaurant, and it was successful. But I worked there for 2 years, 2 or 3 years, and I worked there on the weekends and in the summer, and I progressed from being a bus boy was my first job, and then I thought, well, that was boring, so I thought I'd try being a dishwasher. The dishwasher job lasted a few months, and then I thought, well, I'll try cook. I love cooking. That was the best job. The time went fast. People stood in line to get seated. And I would work the early shift, like from 7 a.m. to 3, 7 to 3 on Saturday and Sunday. And it was just nuts, the amount of eggs and batter for pancakes and waffles you'd go through. But it was hard work, but you know, I enjoyed it. And then my dad, for extra money in the summer, because teachers only got paid 9 months out of the year until I don't know when, but back in the 50s and 60s, they only got paid 9 months out of the year, which all that money was spent if you had 5 kids.
Sure.
A house and a couple of cars. So he and some friends painted houses. So they house painted in the summer, and my dad got to taking me along, and I learned house painting and caulking and glazing windows and working up on walkboards on 2-story houses. I mean, literally. And then that's what I did in the summers when I was in college and law school. At least 4 or 5 of those summers, I painted houses by myself. Yeah, I go bid the job, you know, get the materials, do the work, and you know, it was pretty hard work, but I enjoyed it. And so, you know, that's how I made money for school and spending money.
Are you the easy carpentering around town, around home now with your own house?
I can do quite a bit of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I did some things this last weekend. So yeah, definitely painting. I haven't paid anyone to paint for me in almost 50 years because I don't mind doing the painting, and I know how to do it, and I can just do it. So, you know, it's one thing I can do. One thing that most people don't like to do. So, but
You can save a lot of pesos.
yeah, you save some money. Want me to go on about? I have 2 children. Yeah, son Alan and a daughter Laura. Alan is, I have to think here, he's 41. Laura's 38. Alan's a chemical engineer. Alan graduated from Rose-Hulman in chemical engineering, and lives in Ohio. Lives in Maumee, Ohio, near Toledo.
Okay.
Laura, I said, she went to Southern Illinois at Carbondale, then went to UIC in Chicago for a master's degree in social work. So she graduated social work, master's in social work, worked about 10 years in social work and some other things, and then one day announced I'm going to study for the LSAT, they call it, Law School Aptitude Test, and go to law school. And she did. And she's working for a law firm in Chicago.
Did that surprise you and Alice?
It did, because I never leaned on her to do anything. You know, it's her life. It's her. You know, and we'd had a few conversations, but nothing intense, and certainly nothing like, you know, what are you gonna? One of those sayings like, "What are you gonna be when you grow up?" No, she was doing fine. They're both great kids. So yeah, she's in Chicago and she liked what she does. Neither one is married, neither has any children. So we don't have any grandchildren, which, you know, that's their life. That's not my life. So, you know, that's fine.
Do you feel uncomfortable about your daughter living in Chicago?
No. Because I lived there for 3 years. I know you lived there, or lived in the area. She's a smart person. You live in the right neighborhood. I mean, there's places in just about any city, probably including Terre Haute, certainly places, bigger cities where Indianapolis has its issues. But she's in a very nice apartment, a very nice neighborhood. She's in the city. She's not outside in the suburb. But she loves the public transportation. She gets around. Her office is downtown. She can take public transportation to get downtown. She calls us when she's walking. No, I'm not uncomfortable with her there, because I
knew the Lincoln Park area has always been such an upscale area. There have been some problems there now. I can see them too.
She's in a community, and I can't think of her right now, but she's lived in Lakeview. She's lived near the lake. She lived close to Wrigley Field. She's lived in a lot of different places, and but she's comfortable where she's at.
That's
and
great.
Yeah, she's doing fine, and you know, of course, Alice and I have had a good marriage, and Alice is a native of Marshall, so she has an extended family here, which is like my family now, you know, but you know, I've been here for 48 going on 49 years, so it's a long time. So, you know, Alice, and I say this, but it's true, Alice is an avid cooker, loves to cook. I cook some, but not near as much as Alice. But she grew up in that environment. Her mother fixed big meals every day for the family that farmed. And so she enjoys planning meals. I enjoy eating. So I guess that, you know, I like to grill. I do grill.
What if you grill?
I like to grill. We have a gas grill. I love to grill out. I love to do ribs, hamburgers, brats, chicken. I mean, yeah. So we had kind of a fast. Of course, I was 32 when I met Alice, and Alice was already through college and working. So we had pretty fast courtship and got married pretty fast. But, you know, we love each other, and it's been great. It's worked. And so we travel a lot. Like I said, we love to play golf. We play golf a lot all the time. We travel to see our kids. We're always talking to our kids. We have a close relationship with our children, and we're constantly in touch with them and what's going on in their lives. But I have a close relationship with my siblings too. I mean, so, and Alice has a close relationship with her siblings. So family's important. I mean, you know, family's an important part of our lives. We love to go to sporting events too. I mean, just an example, last Saturday morning, Alice said, well, what about going to the Illinois football game today? Well, we did. I went on StubHub, bought some tickets. We take off for Champaign, and 3 hours later, we're sitting in the stands watching the game. And we just, we'll do that. And then we've been able to be snowbirds that go to Florida. She loves to travel. We have a lot of interests in common, which I think makes for a very good
Travel's
marriage.
mostly been in the States, or have you done anything European? Or?
We've been to Europe, we've been at least 3 times. We've been to Italy. We did a 2-week trip to Italy. We did a 1-week trip to France when Alan, our son, was working over there. We just decided, hey, let's go there. He's working there. We can stay with him for a while. And so,
travel guide.
Yeah, and so we took the train from, we say Reims, but it's like Reims, France, and that's where he was at, and we could take the train for about an hour to Paris. We've been to Ireland. We took a 2-week trip to Ireland.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I drove on the wrong side of the road for 2 weeks and got along okay. And we never had a real mishap.
How about the roundabouts?
Oh yeah, the roundabouts.
Especially on the wrong side of the road.
When I picked up the car, she said, if you just get in a roundabout, you don't know what to do, just stay in it till you can figure it out. But there getting to be more roundabouts in the States too. But so anyway, yeah. And then we took a 2-week Mediterranean cruise a year ago, and we started at Gibraltar. Well, we got on the cruise in Barcelona. We flew to Barcelona, got on the cruise ship there. First stop was Gibraltar. And because I think we kind of backtracked a little bit. And then we went on to a bunch of other places.
Did you visit with the monkeys when you were up in
Yes, I had monkeys on me. I got pictures of a monkey on me, yeah. And of course we made quite a few side trips, excursions, one of which was back to Rome for a day when we were on the cruise. We took a train to Rome and went back there. Coincidentally, the security seemed to be very tight in Rome the day we were there. A lot of security. You always see a lot of security in Europe. Not, uniformed people with big rifles. But it seemed to be a little bit different. Come to find out that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was visiting the Pope that day. And that's why, there was just a lot of security. Everything was fine, but which kind of makes you feel, to me, a little comfortable. Because there's people looking out. So yeah, we've done those trips. Of course, we've been to Canada, we've been to Mexico several times. Mostly Cozumel. Not to the mainland, but Cozumel.
Do you have a favorite state or a favorite trip that you've visited?
I think it'd be a toss-up between Italy and Ireland. We've talked about that. Now, we've done a lot of traveling in the U.S. We've traveled out west to Seattle, to the Northeast, of course, to Florida and back quite a few times. But a lot of national parks.
Oh yeah.
A lot of national parks, and the Outer Banks of Carolina, and we've done a lot of traveling. I got the travel bug from my parents, and then our kids. I pass that travel bug along to our kids because now they like to travel, and we all travel together sometimes.
Great. Have you visited and traveled around Utah much?
Yes,
I think it's one of those beautiful states.
What they call the Utah Rocks, the Utah National Parks there. What is it? Canyons and there's 5 of them.
Arches. And
Arches, yeah, we did that. For a number of years, Alice's family, the Mackeys, we would do a week or 10-day trip together. And we've been to Door County, we've been to Ohio, forget the name of the, Sandusky. We've been out to Utah. We did another trip to Denver because Alice has a brother in Denver. We've been to Nashville. I like Nashville, Tennessee, because I like the music, and I can just walk along and listen to some of that music, spend a whole afternoon. But
did you visit the Purple Onion?
I did. I also visited Tootsie's
Yeah.
and the Country Music Hall of Fame. Kind of became a little bit of a country music fan several years ago. And I like the older country music, not the modern. But that was a nice place to visit. We did some Civil War things, and we've been out. I have a good friend from college, Steve, who became a friend of the family, and actually have traveled with him quite a bit. And he's an avid traveler. He lives in Seattle, and so we've been to Seattle several times. And we were just out in Seattle earlier this year, and we went to Oregon and Washington.
I think Seattle is such a beautiful place, but I guess they got so many problems now with the homeless and the migrants.
They've straightened that up.
Have they?
Yes, because my friend Steve had those problems near his work, and I saw it firsthand. But I think they've been able to clean that up.
Oh, I hope so.
And it's too bad, but yeah. So what else should I talk about?
Nothing that you have to, Joe. It's been great visiting with you.
Well, that's fine. I've had a good career here in Marshall. I mean, I'd have to say that I don't think you could ask for anything much better.
Pretty good place.
It's a pretty good place. And the thing was, when I got that call from Omer Schaller, and I thought about it for a few minutes, I thought, wait a minute, Marshall, and I didn't know much about Marshall.
You probably didn't.
Now let me throw something in here though, but I didn't know much about Marshall, but it wasn't far from Terre Haute. It's not like somebody calling you up and saying, hey, you want to go to San Francisco or Tucson, Arizona, because I thought, well, if this, for whatever reason, didn't work out, I didn't have, I could just wade across the Wabash. But it's been good. And the people are fine, who are very good, and I just wish that we could find some young lawyers to come to Marshall and work, because that's a concern. I don't know what the future holds there, but it's not looking.
I feel like that's true of a lot of businesses and industries.
Right.
Just to get that new replacement and it's going to be dependable is another story.
Right.
In your 40 years plus that you've lived here, it's changed some too.
Oh yeah.
What's your opinion of some of the changes that have taken place?
Well,
your office used to have a lot of businesses real close.
Yeah, and I was going to say that. you know, the town fought a little bit. All towns fought Walmart. Now it's Walmart, and that's all we really have. Now we have a few other like Dollar General and things like that. But yeah, the hardware stores, the local stores, the card shop, the locally owned
drugstore.
There were 2 drugstores, and there were.
We had a variety store.
Yeah, the Caldwell's. And yeah, it's changed. And, you know, but time marches on and things change. And, you know, I
have a feeling any swing back to some of those downtown businesses. And
it'd be nice, you know, right now, you know, the old Mars Furniture Building is an issue, and
it's pretty iffy, I think.
well, it's a little iffy, and part of the problem is that it's all basically it's one building, including where Bennett, Schroeder, and Wyke is. It's tied together.
I guess it would be.
Yes. And so it's
I thought of that one.
there is a concern there. There may be a solution, but solution may be expensive, and
Everything is.
and everything's expensive. But you think about, well, but what's the long term?
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you know, I was born in 1950, March 8th, 1950 is my birth date. So it's pretty easy to figure out how old someone is, and it's like how much, you know, what do you want to invest? And but yeah, it's been very good. You know, I would say Marshall's been very good to me. I hope I've been halfway good to Marshall, but it's been a good marriage, I guess, between me and Marshall, I think. We have been able to, one question was talking to someone in England described Marshall. We've been lucky through Rotary to have had 5 exchange students live with us. A couple of which we still stay in touch with. And one of them we just saw a month ago who was back in Marshall. So his first name's Shintaro. He's from Japan. He was here about 4 or 5 years ago. But, you know, Marshall is a small town. Obviously, if I was describing Marshall, it's a small rural town. It's a county seat. We're a decent drive to get to most major things like Chicago or Indianapolis or St. Louis. But I think I've always thought there were a lot of advantages to living in a small town.
Amen.
And, but it's hard to convince other people that that's true, you know.
Especially if they've always been associated with the metropolitan area.
Right, if the bigger jobs are in the metropolitan area. I think one thing that's changed drastically in the last 50 or 60 years is the amount of student debt that kids come out of college and professional school with. And they really almost have to get a job in a bigger firm in a bigger city. And
even then, it takes sometimes years to get that paid
right.
off or down.
Exactly. So, but I don't know if there's anything else you want me to.
Well, I just like to say, Joe, I really enjoyed visiting with you.
Okay.
And I think we always.
I know what I was going to say. Let me throw this in.
Sure.
My dad's grandfather was William Schroeder, who married Katie Berner in about 1898. Now, Katie Berner is from the Zion church area. The Berners.
It sounds familiar.
one of the relatives of the Burners, or they're connected, are the Millers. And I don't know if you knew Leland Miller.
Yeah.
Leland Miller and my father, through this marriage, were cousins. I'm a cousin to Bob Miller and his family.
Okay.
Now, Kyles are connected in there some way. Doris Kyle,
Yeah.
who I think may have passed away, but she somehow was related. I don't know all my relation. When I came here in the 70s, people were coming up to me and saying, well, we're related. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I didn't know anything. But my dad remembered a few times in his childhood coming over to reunions and gatherings, probably at the Burners or the Millers. He remembered climbing up in haylofts and playing around, but he really didn't ever have a close relationship with any of these people.
Well, that's especially interesting because my wife's uncle is a Miller, Herb Miller. His
Okay.
relation to all the ones south of town.
Yeah.
He lived in Detroit, or the area of Michigan, and his daughter, Kay Miller, of course, is Eleanor's first cousin.
Okay.
She lives in Wisconsin. So, I mean, it's interesting.
So there could be a connection.
Could be.
Now, to be more transparent, my dad was adopted. He was adopted from birth. Out of two teenagers that, and the girl that got pregnant went to Indianapolis to live with a relative in 1922, and my dad was born May 30th, 1923. And then his dad, Robert Schroeder, adopted, he and his wife at that time adopted my dad. And that's where the name Schroeder came from. So there's no blood relation there, but there's certainly a relation by, by adoption. And then moved to Terre Haute. My dad's dad, Robert Schroeder, was a Terre Haute police officer. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but I know where his revolver is that has his name etched in it. That says Robert Schroeder. So,
Has it been used recently?
no, it has never been, it's not been used in 50 years as far as I know.
Better not try it.
Yeah, no. But anyway, I wanted to throw that in, that here I come to Marshall, not knowing anybody really. I guess I knew Omer Schaller, and then come to find out, and I have a copy of this marriage license or whatever you call it that says William Schroeder married Katie Burner.
But that's in a small town.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many people are related. We told our kids when we moved back here, keep your nose clean, because everyone's going to probably know you. And whether you know them or not.
I found that out the hard way a few times because people would come in the office wanting to hire me to do something, and I would find out that that person's related to one of the secretaries or a relative of one of the secretaries. So you learn the hard way to check all that out.
Joe, I wanted to go back to, you mentioned your grandmother, Rose Hipple, right?
Yes.
Wasn't she at Burnside for a while?
Yes.
Okay, Eleanor, my wife, used to work on a volunteer basis out at Burnside an awful lot, and I know she got to know her.
Yeah. My grandmother was there for about 10 years.
Was it that long? Okay.
Yes. And then my mom was at Burnside's
Oh, yeah.
for about 5 years. before she died.
Well, Eleanor got to know your grandmother
Yeah,
real well.
right.
I don't know. She just volunteered out there a lot and
Yeah.
got to know her.
Well, I was in a stable place. I mean, I wasn't likely to move, and I was familiar with the nursing home. I thought the nursing home did a good job, and I knew I could visit my grandmother and my mom as often as I wanted to, daily or every other day or whatever, and I knew they'd be well cared for, and they were. And so, yeah, so that's how that happened. Yeah, that was,
Well, I kind of forgot that until you mentioned her name. And
Right.
then the more I thought about that name, sure rings a bell. And
yeah.
clicked.
Well, and in fact, my middle name is Ray, R-A-Y, which is Rose Hippel's husband, Ray Hippel.
Okay.
That's where my middle name,
Okay.
my first name comes from a brother of my grandmother, a brother of Rose Hippel. Rose Hippel was the 10th child, 10 children, and she was the youngest, some of which were born in Germany. And my grandmother was not. She was born over here. I think when they immigrated from Germany, Alsace-Lorraine area, 4 or 5 of the kids were born. Some of them ended up in Villa Grove working for the railroad. Some of them ended up in Terre Haute working for the railroad.
Big time, man.
Yeah.
Have you ever done any research or going back to your family's research into
My
history
brother
in Germany?
Jack has. Not too far back into Germany, but that's something we've talked about doing. But Jack has put together a pretty good family tree from about the time of the immigration. My Claire is my grandmother's maiden name, C-L-E-R. So if you drive into Villa Grove, you'll see a big business, and the owner of that's name is Claire, C-L-E-R. It's, and I forget, a fabrication business or something. And my brother Jack and I actually met and talked to him. He's related. And my grandmother, Rose Hippel's parents are buried in the Catholic Church Cemetery at Villa Grove.
Okay.
Right up front, it's kind of like they were one of the first ones, a big stone. And I can't, right now I can't, I think maybe it was Jacob Clare. But yeah, and I've been there, I visited that site.
So many times people do genealogy work. They came across a skeleton in the closet and that hits.
Yeah, I haven't come across too many skeletons.
I guess everyone's got them, so what the heck.
Yeah, so.
It's a part of history.
It is, yeah.
Well, Joe, it's been great visiting with you, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to do this, because as time marches on,
Right,
a lot of history and things are lost if there isn't someone to put it down.
right.
And these are digital on the library website. So if your kids want to look at this in Chicago, they can.
Okay, all right.
I was going to ask you, isn't the John Marshall Law School now not called that?
It's called the University of Illinois
Okay.
Law School in